The air in the chamber was thick, with the smell of burning herbs and blood, a desperate, sweet scent, meant to mask the truth of what was happening in the great canopied bed. Each gasp from the girl was a shallow, ragged thing. The pain was alive now, a living creature, coiled deep within her 13-year-old womb, tearing her apart with every relentless wave. Each breath was a shard of glass. The midwives, their faces grim masks of duty, whispered words like royal sacrifice and divine purpose. But their hands were cold, their eyes carefully avoiding hers as they worked. The heir was coming, and she, the child queen, was nothing more than the road he would travel to the throne, a road to be used and then forgotten. This is the story of a girl who did everything that was ever asked of her. She wore the crown they gave her. She spoke the vows they wrote. She allowed her body to be used for the one purpose her family ever truly valued. She bore the heir. She secured the bloodline. She fulfilled her destiny. And in doing so, she signed her own death warrant. The cruelest irony was this: her success was her annihilation. She died, not in defiance of her duty, but because of it. But what if her death wasn't just a tragic twist of fate? What if the fever that consumed her, the childbed anguish that stole her last breath, wasn't misfortune, but design? The always intended conclusion of a cold political calculation set in motion the day she was born. What if the cradle that now held the future king was built upon a secret grave? This is not the story they painted in the official portraits. This is the story hidden between the lines of court documents, in the unsent letters, in the silent screams that echoed behind palace walls. This is the story of the child queen who died after bearing the heir her family chose. If you are ready to uncover the stories history tried to bury, to listen for the whispers they tried to silence, then you're in the right place. Consider subscribing, and let's begin. She was born, not into a family, but into a prophecy. The midwives later swore that on the night of her birth, the moon had bled a rusty red, casting a strange, ethereal light through the chamber window. They called it an omen, a sign of power, of destiny, of a fierce and glorious future. They whispered it to the courtiers, who whispered it to the diplomats, who wrote it in their dispatches. By the time her first cry echoed through the stone corridors, the narrative was already set in stone. This was no ordinary girl, she was a solution. Her mother, exhausted, bleeding, was an afterthought. The queen had done her duty. She had produced a viable child, a daughter who could be leveraged. The mother's suffering, the 3 days of fever that nearly claimed her, were irrelevant details in the grand ledger of the dynasty. All that mattered was the tiny swaddled object in the gilded cradle. Her potential was everything. Her personhood, nothing. They named her for a saint and a great-grandmother, layering on the weight of expectation with every syllable. But in the court, she was simply called the asset, the promise, the living, breathing key as to a stronger alliance. From that moment, her childhood was systematically dismantled. It wasn't violent, but quiet, insidious. Her first toy, a wooden doll carved by a doting servant, was taken away when she was 4. "Queens do not cling to dolls," her governess said, her voice soft, but her hands firm. They cling to power. In its place, she was given a miniature scepter, cold and heavy, in her small palm. Her meals were not for hunger, but for optimization, weighed, measured, designed to keep her slender and pure, not healthy, not happy. At a festival, a platter of sweet cakes was whisked away before she could take a second bite. "A queen's appetite," the steward intoned, "is for governance, not confection." Friendship was the most dangerous luxury of all. She learned this when her cousin, a girl 2 years older with a laugh like bells, vanished. They had been caught giggling in the library, sharing a book of fables, stories of knights and adventures, not treaties and genealogies. A week later, her cousin was gone, sent to a distant, silent convent. The official reason? Refined spiritual education. The real message? Attachment is weakness. Love is liability. The only relationship permitted was the one with the throne. Every mirror reflected not her face, but her function. Her hair braided not for play, but for presentation. Her gowns fitted not for comfort, but to display her value, like a jewel in a setting. She was constantly watched, her every word recorded by a silent scribe. Did she sigh at her lessons? It was noted. A sign of petulance. Did she gaze longingly at the children playing in the courtyard? It was logged, distracted from purpose. She learned to keep her face a smooth, placid mask, a still pond that betrayed nothing of the currents beneath. She learned to breathe without seeming to need air. The final act of her transformation came on her 10th birthday. There was no party, no cake. Instead, she was summoned to her father's private council chamber. The room smelled of old parchment, wax, and male ambition. Her father, the king, did not smile. He gestured to a scroll unfurled on the oak table, held down by lead weights. The script was dense, the language alien. "This," he said, his voice devoid of warmth, "is the betrothal agreement. It secures our eastern border for a generation. It guarantees peace." She stared at the swirling letters, unable to read the words that would dictate the rest of her life, but she saw her name, beautifully inscribed, and another name beside it, Prince Alaric, of the House of Valerius, a man she knew only from a stiff, unsmiling portrait, a man 3 times her age, from a cold, mountainous kingdom, known for brutal winters and even more brutal politics. "You will be the bridge between our kingdoms," her father said. His finger tapped the wax seal that would soon bind her. "Your children will unite 2 great bloodlines. This is your purpose. This is your glory." In that moment, any fragile hope that she was loved for herself shattered. She was not a daughter. She was a treaty, a land deal written on parchment, soon to be sealed with her body. Prince Alaric was not a monster. He was simply the other signatory. His age, his character, his desires, irrelevant, just as hers were. He needed a fertile queen from a powerful line. Her family needed his armies, his gold. It was a transaction. She was the currency. The betrayal was not in the arrangement itself. It was in the moment her father turned away, already discussing dowry terms with his advisor. He didn't see the tears she refused to shed. He did not see the small hand trembling at her side. He saw only the fulfilled clause, the secured alliance, the gilded cage they had built around her since birth, now had a lock, and the key had just been thrown away. The girl was gone. Only the queen-to-be remained, an empty vessel waiting to be filled with the destiny others had chosen for her. The day of the transaction dawned not with sunlight, but with the glint of gold thread and the cold shimmer of pearls. They dressed her in a gown so heavy it felt like a suit of armour, ivory silk, embroidered with the snarling lions of her house and the sharp-beaked eagles of his. Each stitch felt like a chain. The weight of the fabric threatened to buckle her knees, but the ladies-in-waiting held her upright, pulling the laces tighter, tighter, until her breath came in short, sharp gasps. The coronet placed on her head was not a crown of glory, but a cold metallic band of pain. It pressed into her temples, a reminder of the burden she already carried, though she was not yet deemed worthy to wear it. The procession to the cathedral was a blur of deafening noise and overwhelming faces. The cheers of the crowd, a savage roar, a celebration that felt like a threat. Petals rained down upon her, bright, sweet-smelling, but they might as well have been stones. Behind her smile, a carefully practiced curve of the lips she had rehearsed in the mirror, her mind was screaming. The organ thundered, music vibrating in her bones, each chord a tremor of impending doom. The air, thick with incense, cloying, suffocating. Every step down the endless aisle was a step further away from the girl she had been, toward the stranger waiting at the altar. He stood there, Prince Alaric, a monument of a man, carved from granite and duty. His face, weathered and stern, showed no emotion. He did not look at her with affection, nor even curiosity, only with the assessing gaze of a man inspecting an asset. His hand, when she was forced to place hers in it, was large, cold, rough. It swallowed hers completely, a trap of flesh and bone. Then came the moment of erasure. The Archbishop's voice boomed across the hushed cathedral. "From this day forward," he declared, "you are no longer the Princess Ilara. Henceforth, you shall be known as Her Royal Highness, Crown Princess of Valerius, Duchess of the Northern Marches." Ilara, her name, the one thing that had ever felt truly hers, whispered by a nurse in the dark, called out in a garden long ago, gone, stripped away in front of thousands. She was no longer a girl, she was a title, a collection of lands and honours, a vacant position, filled. The feast was a torturous spectacle of false joy. She sat beside her husband, a stranger, as course after course of rich food was laid before her. Each smell turned her stomach. Toasts were made to their union, to prosperity, to a long line of strong heirs. That word, heir, hung in the air, heavier than the smoke from the roasting meats. She ate nothing. She simply moved the food across her plate, a performance of participation. Then came the ritual of the bedding, a public humiliation, a bawdy procession to the marital chamber, filled with laughter, crude jokes, and watchful eyes. The great oak door closed behind her with a definitive thud. The noise of celebration faded into a distant, muffled roar. The room was vast, cold, dominated by a bed that looked less like a resting place and more like a sacrificial altar. He said nothing. He moved with grim, methodical purpose. No tenderness, no affection. It was not love, it was possession, a contract, executed. She stared at the canopy above, tracing patterns in the fabric, focusing on the flicker of shadows in the candlelight. Her mind, a blank page. She retreated deep inside, beyond reach. When it was over, he left without a word. The door closing behind him a second time was the sound of her old life, locked away forever. The morning after, the narrative of the lie began, the ladies who attended her, simpering, bright. "You look radiant, Your Highness," one chirped. "The glow of a new bride," another added, brushing her hair with forced cheer. A priest arrived, prayers spilling from his lips, blessings not for her, but for her womb, his hands drawing holy symbols over her abdomen as though it were a field to be sown. Left alone, she caught her reflection in a polished silver mirror. A pale face stared back, shadows beneath her eyes, on her arm, the faint purpling imprint of his grip. She touched the bruise, a secret testament to reality, a truth no blessing could conceal. The girl in the mirror was a stranger, draped in silks, crowned in sorrow, her eyes holding quiet, devastating knowledge. The wedding was over. The funeral, for the child she had been, was complete. The news of her pregnancy was announced not with intimacy, but with a royal proclamation. Bells pealed across the capital, not for her, but for the heir apparent. The court erupted in a frenzy of calculated jubilation. Her womb, the subject of so much whispered speculation, had finally yielded its dividend. Overnight, she ceased to be even a princess. She became, entirely, unequivocally, a vessel. Her body was no longer her own. It was a state matter, a sacred relic, temporarily housing the future. Her chambers became a gilded prison, her every move monitored with suffocating intensity. Physicians with cold hands examined her weekly, then daily. Their discussions a clinical murmur above her head. The hips are still narrow, one said. The growth is satisfactory, another noted, and as if assessing livestock. Her meals, prepared in a separate kitchen, were delivered with a checklist of nutrients. She was forbidden to walk in the gardens, too much sun. Forbidden to ride, too much jostling. Forbidden even to read anything that might agitate the humours. Her world shrank to 4 walls, her purpose reduced to a single, swelling function. The physical reality was a private horror, a child's body, straining to create another life. The glow they praised was the clammy sweat of perpetual nausea. Morning sickness was no mild inconvenience. It was wrenching, exhausting, leaving her trembling on the cold stone floor for hours. Her back ached with a deep, relentless throb. Her spine bowed beneath a weight it was never meant to bear. Her skin stretched taut, itchy, alien, a map of silvery lines etching her transformation. At night, she lay awake, terrified by the flutters and kicks within her. Not the quickening of a maternal bond, but the movements of a parasite, a creature consuming her from the inside out. She dreamed of drowning, of being buried alive, of her body splitting open. Then came the day the cradle arrived, a monstrous ornate thing, carved from ebony, inlaid with mother of pearl, too large, too heavy, a piece of furniture fit not for a child, but for a giant. The royal crest snarled from its headboard, lion and eagle locked in eternal struggle. The courtiers oohed and ahed. A cradle fit for a king, they chirped. But to her, it was a coffin. They placed it at the foot of her bed. From that moment, it dominated the room. Its shadow fell across her bedclothes. Everywhere she turned, it loomed. She began to hide pieces of bread and dried fruit beneath her mattress, a nonsensical primal instinct, as if she knew, when the time came, there would be nothing left for her. The moment of clarity came when a foreign ambassador toured her chambers. She sat by the window, desperate for a sliver of sunlight. The physician, accompanying the envoy, gestured toward her. "As you can see, the vessel is healthy," he said. "The heir thrives. We are monitoring the situation closely, of course. The priority, as His Majesty decrees, is the safe delivery of the child. All other considerations are secondary." The words hung in the air, colder than winter wind. The vessel, the situation. All other considerations are secondary, not a slip of the tongue, the unvarnished truth. She was a situation, her life, another consideration. Later that week, her father visited. His eyes gleamed with dynastic triumph. He placed a hand on her stomach. "You have done well, my dear," he said. The endearment felt like mockery. "Our line is secure." He saw the heir, he saw the alliance. He did not see his daughter, She was pale, trembling, 13 years old, staring into the abyss. She was a bridge, and once the heir, the true king, had crossed over, the bridge could collapse into the river and be forgotten. Her womb was not a cradle, it was a tomb, and she was being buried alive, day by day, with every kick from the child within, every congratulatory smile from a courtier, every approving nod from her family. The transaction was nearly complete. All that remained was the final, bloody payment. The onset of labour was not the beginning of life, but the beginning of the end. The pain came like a storm breaking over her body, violent, merciless, unrelenting. Not the sacred, transformative suffering the priests had promised, not the holy travail the court poets would later sing about, but raw, destructive agony, a tearing apart of flesh and spirit. Each contraction was not a passage to motherhood, but a blade cutting her down. Her screams, muffled by the thick curtains of the bed, were swallowed by the palace walls. They would never echo in the songs of victory. They would never be remembered. The chamber reeked of blood and smoke from burning herbs. Thick incense clogged the air, a desperate attempt to sanctify what was, in truth, a slaughter. Midwives swarmed around her, not with tenderness, but with grim efficiency. Their hands moved quickly, clinically, like butchers at their work. Their eyes never met hers. Hold her still, more towels. The child must be saved. She was alone, in a crowd, surrounded by women who touched her body but refused her humanity. No one whispered comfort. No one spoke her name. She was not Ilara anymore. She was the vessel, breaking open. Hours blurred into eternity. Her body convulsed under the weight of the air pressing down, tearing its way free. Every gasp was fire in her lungs. Every cry scraped her throat raw. And then, the moment came, a final savage rip of agony, a cry that was not hers. The wail of the newborn heir pierced the chamber like a trumpet announcing victory, and instantly, the focus shifted. Hands that had pressed against her body in demand, now lifted away. All eyes turned to the child. The midwives bustled, wrapping him in silks, parading him before one another with trembling reverence. The prince lives. The heir is strong. No one looked at the girl who lay bleeding in the bed. No one saw the pallor creeping across her skin. No one noticed the silence of the mother, drowned out by the triumphant cry of the son. The transaction was complete, the contract fulfilled. She had delivered the future, and in doing so she ceased to exist. Her death was not sudden. It was a slow, merciless fading. Her strength seeped from her with the blood soaking the sheets. Her breaths grew shallow, ragged. She could still hear them, celebrations echoing through the halls, the jubilation spilling out into the streets, bells ringing, voices cheering, a kingdom rejoicing. But none of it was for her. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Her voice had already been stolen. And in the haze of her final moments, her mind slipped back, not to the throne, not to the crown, not even to the child that had just torn its way into the world, but to a memory, a single afternoon in the palace gardens. She'd been 6, hidden beneath a willow tree, laughing with her cousin as they read a book of fables, their feet bare in the grass. The sunlight had been warm. The world, for a fleeting moment, had felt kind. That was the last thing she remembered. Not duty, not destiny, but the fragile, forbidden happiness of a stolen childhood. Then, she was gone. A whisper extinguished in the roar of celebration, and almost immediately the lie began. The courtiers spoke in solemn tones. The queen succumbed to complications. The will of God has been done. A noble sacrifice for the realm. The priests intoned her name in prayers, painting her death as holy martyrdom. Scribes wrote it into the chronicles as destiny fulfilled. The portrait painters would one day capture her with calm eyes, a faint smile, a halo of light around her head. But that was not the truth. The truth was blood-soaked sheets. The truth was a child's body broken open for a dynasty. The truth was a 13-year-old girl who never wanted a crown, never wanted a throne, who only wanted to laugh beneath a willow tree one more time. But history does not write of her screams. It does not paint the bruises, the sweat, the terror. History writes of the heir. The bells rang for the boy. The kingdom cheered for the bloodline. And the child queen was erased. Sacrifice, they called it. But in truth, it was bloodshed. In the official histories, she was given a serene, noble ending, a marble statue erected in the palace gardens, depicting her with a gentle smile, a stone infant cradled in her arms, a moment of motherhood she never lived to experience. Court poets wrote verses praising her sacrifice for the crown. A wing of the royal hospital bore her name, her agony, sanitized into an act of charity. She became a symbol, a footnote, a beautiful, tragic ghost, used to reinforce the very system that killed her. Her story stripped of its horror, polished into a parable of dutiful femininity. The son she died bringing into the world grew up beneath the golden weight of that lie. He was told his mother was a saint, that she had joyfully given her life for his future. He never knew the truth, the terror, the confinement, the broken body of a child pressed into service for a dynasty. He never knew that his first breath was purchased with her last desperate scream. And still, he ruled as he was meant to. His legacy built upon the silent, unmarked grave of a girl erased. But we know, you and I, we have looked behind the marble, we have read between the verses, they called it a sacrifice. But it was a transaction. Her life, for their legacy. She was not a queen. She was a prisoner. She was not a mother. She was a means to an end. A 13-year-old girl, used and discarded by the powerful. Her story buried because the truth was too damning. This is why we dig up these stories, not to dwell on misery, but to give voice to the silenced, to remember the girl, not just the crown, to honor the life, not the lie. If you believe her story, and the stories of countless others like her deserve to be told with honesty and with rage, then subscribe. Help us turn up the volume on the whispers history tried to suppress, because someone must speak for the child queens who never could.